All right, let's get to work. Mickelson here with you. This is our Wednesday morning get-together, and today we're going to talk with Michele Bachmann for a little bit. Welcome back, Michele. Thank you for being here.
I always love being here. Thank you for having me on WHO this morning.
You just were fresh from an experience down in Pella when you were talking about business, and you were at the business roundtable, I think it was yesterday.
I was, and I was really thankful for that opportunity. It was a wonderful forum. It was held over at R-Minn, and we each had about 15 minutes to be able to talk about manufacturing and what we could do to turn the manufacturing industry around, and I am very excited about that. My father started here in manufacturing. I was born up in Waterloo. My dad was a tool and die maker and then was an engineer at Chamberlain Corporation. We had a lot of manufacturing in Iowa when I was born and when I was growing up here, and we've lost quite a bit, and so we need to make sure that we can bring these jobs back because we have to make something in this country again. That's part of the problem. Well, the way we do that is the United States is no longer the most premier place to do business anymore. We have to be straight about that. We have the second highest corporate tax rate in the world. If your corporate tax rate is 34% and Canada's is 18%, then you have a businessman, like a manufacturer like I met here in Des Moines, who buys $1 million piece of equipment and decides to relocate it up in Canada rather than here, and he sent jobs up with it. 10,000 people, businessmen also did it that same day. These decisions are happening all the time. So you lower the corporate tax rate. We've got a $1.8 trillion regulatory burden on every business across the United States. We all share that burden. That's a very high cost of doing business. And then the government is every day heaping more and more burdens, like Obamacare, which costs about $2,000 to $3,000 per employee. It's a tax. Dodd-Frank, which is drying up credit for businesses. So all of these negative burdens that government has put on the backs of businesses have to go away, and I'm committed to that. I get it as a tax lawyer, and I'm a job creator myself. I get what needs to be done.
The president says that his new health care plan will include 30 million people now will be covered because of his plan.
Well, and the president also said that we would see 4 million new jobs created because of Obamacare. Nancy Pelosi said we would see 400,000 jobs created almost immediately. Where are the jobs? The president also said that the average household would save $2,500 a year on health insurance premiums. Jan, how many WHO listeners right now save $2,500 this year on their health insurance premium? Probably almost no one. And
well, I always answer rhetorical questions. And my rhetorical questions, how many? I always say, my wife and I have this thing, and it's always 4.
4? Okay.
Yes, how many people? It's always 4, no matter what the question is. 4.
Well, the problem is it has been devastating people's wallets.
Well, what about the premise of Obama's claim? 30 million people are now covered that weren't. Is that true?
Well, that's what he claims. As a matter of fact, it could end up being more like 50 million new people that are in, because there are essentially no enforceable prohibitions on illegal aliens having access to Obamacare. And so we'll see a tremendously high number of new people coming in. But, of course, there's no new resources going in. All of us who are paying for health insurance premiums now will just simply be paying for more people because there are no new resources going in. We are the government.
Right.
And so that's what socialized medicine is. Fewer people paying for more people's care. Cost shifting at the worst possible time when we can least afford it.
So this is what that message is. What propelled you to win the Iowa Iowa straw poll this summer. And
it is, and that's
really resonated.
And that's the message that we're continuing to send all across America, because people need to recognize we're so overspending, Jan, that every month we're borrowing over $100 billion from the Treasury. The Treasury Department has to go out and purchase money at a very high cost. They go to China, they go to other nations, they go to the Federal Reserve. And so now every month, now imagine that, this country is going into debt over $100 billion every month. Compare that to the last time the Republicans had a budget. That was 2007. And when that happened, the entire deficit for the year was $160 billion. But under President Obama, we're going into debt over $100 billion every month.
It's an interesting, the money issues extremely resonate here in Iowa. We're trying to bail out and trying to figure out a way to bail out the country of Greece, who are at 135% of their GDP. They spend that much more than they take in. The United States, as a pretty close to right now, is at a wash. We spend
We have 15 trillion in debt.
We are
and our
closing
GDP
in on
is
Greece.
15 trillion.
Yeah,
so we're at about 100% debt to GDP ratio right now. And I certainly hope we're not trying to figure out how to bail out Greece, because it's just like if you have a child who's a 16-year-old who's overspending their money and they crack up the car and they end up having to go to jail. The worst thing you can do as a parent is go and bail that child out of their own irresponsible behavior. Europe continually tries to coddle and bail out Greece. Now Greece is such a tantrum-throwing nation that they're going back to their own people with a vote so that the people can choose whether or not they want to have even a tiny level of austerity. Well, of course they don't. They want to keep spending money. Well, and that's the precursor of what will happen in the United States.
Well, the difference between the United States and Greece, size obviously, and the strength of our economy, and historically so. But Greece, they can't print money because they don't have the reserve currency. They can print all the money they want, and they can inflate their currency, and unless we bail them out, they're stuck with what they've got. The United States can still print money, and because we haven't totally exhausted our reserve status, we can get away with it longer than they can.
We don't have too much longer to get away with it, Jan. We're coming up to the hard reality. That's why I encourage all of your listeners, look very hard at what's going on with Greece right now and the Eurozone. Look very hard, because that's America's future in the not too distant future, because the Federal Reserve is out of control. They're printing money that we don't have. We have fiat money now. Our monetary policy is completely out of whack. Just consider that just in the short amount of time that President Obama has been in office, we've lost at least 10% of the value of every dollar. So when President Obama came into office, that dollar is worth 10 cents less now. That should give everyone pause, because the federal government has stolen from us by overspending money and then printing money to fulfill that void.
So what are you prepared to do about that?
Drastically cut back spending. It's exactly what Greece should be doing right now. That's what we have to do. Every single part of the budget.
How drastically?
What we should do is get it to balance. What we should get it to balance. I'll tell you, we all sent in $2.2 trillion in taxes. I don't know about you, but I think I'm taxed enough already. Most people that I talk to are tapped out. They can't send any more in taxes. So we've all sent in $2.2 trillion. The problem is the federal government spent every bit of that plus an extra $1.5 trillion more, which tells us we shouldn't spend that extra $1.5 trillion.
There was a commercial that the AARP people have put on the air. You maybe have seen it already, of people in that age category standing there saying, you will not touch our benefits. That refers to Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and the prescription drug medicine. That is a special interest group. That age group are gobbling up lots of resources that even the president will say these programs are unsustainable. But you also have the specter of those groups, highly politically organized, and they are ready to defend the turf of the pre-existing programs that they don't want cut. How can you get spending under control without going after some of these sacred cows that are being protected by the turf watchers?
Well, even President Obama admits that there has to be reform in these programs. Everybody admits that there has to be reform, and of course there needs to be. The Medicare Hospital Part B program is dead flat broke in 9 years. So we could go ahead blindly spending as we're spending now with zero reforms, but 9 years from now there'll be a very frail 85-year-old woman that needs a hip replacement, and there will be zero money in the bank to pay for that hip replacement. That's why I believe we have to reform the programs now so they work.
What does it look like?
When it comes to Social Security, we can handle the current retirees that are on the program. We have to keep our promise to them and not diminish what they have right now, so we can afford to do that. But for those who are not yet on Social Security, that program quite simply needs to be reformed, and it needs to go into a program that will work for people and be more identifiable with an ownership program. When it comes to Medicare, this is a program that was instituted by Lyndon Johnson in 1965. We haven't seen any real, true, meaningful reforms other than to add increasing levels of benefit without increasing amount of revenues to pay for it. So what we can do is consider one option, which is subsidizing people's health care insurance options for them, and that would reduce money.
Back in the summer when you did so well at the straw poll, you were in the catbird seat. You were running number one, and you were taking that message on the road and seemed to be resonating. The political landscape has just been reshuffled since then, and now you're trying to get back to your moment. You're trying to get your mojo back. What is it going to take for Michele Bachmann to be competitive?
Well, doing exactly what we did during the straw poll and doing exactly what we're doing now. We are all over Iowa. I'm in Iowa and I grew up here, and so I'm all over Iowa explaining to people how I can turn the country around. I was yesterday in Marshalltown, and we're all across Iowa every day, and that's what we'll be doing, taking our positive pro-growth message all across Iowa.
The issue of we got to get rid of Medicare. I'm not sorry, I've said it wrong. We got to get rid of Obamacare.
Yes, sir.
That was your number one position. You've added to that. What are the other issues that you're pounding on?
Well, people know that I have a core of conviction and that I don't deviate. One thing that people have been very concerned about, you're right, there's been a lot of playing Wall Street on the political calculus where candidates are going up and candidates are going down. But with me, people know that I have a core of conviction. I don't deviate. I'm consistent. There are no surprises with me. I have always been pro-life. I've talked that talk, but I've walked the walk on pro-life. You won't have to worry if I'm changing my position. On the marriage amendment, I was the chief author of the marriage amendment in my home state of Minnesota. I believe we have to have a marriage amendment. I haven't flip-flopped on that issue. When it comes to dealing with terrorists at Guantanamo Bay, I did not say that we should release the terrorists at Guantanamo Bay and let them go for hostages. I've stood strong on that issue. So you don't see deviation from me, and people also know that I've been the person who has been at the forefront calling for these positive solutions on all of these issues.
We're talking here in the studio with Michele Bachmann. She is here with her campaign organizers and her Iowa entourage and a lot of national media following you around, and I appreciate you coming by this morning.
Thanved you.
Should we invite listeners to get involved in the conversation? Please, we can. Beginning with Joel. Good morning, Joel.
Yeah, good morning,
Hi.
Jan. Good morning, Congressman Bachmann. My question this morning is, I don't think it's any secret that Obama invited the Romney guys down to the White House to explain how to implement Obamacare because they had implemented Romney Care in Massachusetts. And it just seems odd that Mitt Romney never seems to be held accountable for that. I don't know how he can continue to stay at top of these polls when the biggest issues for the conservative movement is to get rid of Obamacare. And it just seems like he gets a pass on this or gets lightly questioned by it. And I was just wondering if you had any ideas to maybe combat him a little bit more about that.
All right. Thank you, Joel.
Joel, one of the reasons why I decided to run for President of the United States is because of what I saw in Washington, D.C. I'm an outsider. I am not a politician. I went as a real person, and I was appalled by what I saw. And when I saw Obamacare being offered, I brought 40,000 Americans into Washington, D.C. to fight against Obamacare, and it was a tremendously powerful movement that we had. That also helped launch the major Tea Party movement nationally as well, to continue to amalgamate us around an issue. In 2010, saw the largest pushback of votes, where we had about 63 new House members who won. Going back to the late 20s, we hadn't seen that kind of a movement, and it's because the American people don't want socialized medicine. Fundamentally, that's what Obamacare is, the government takeover of medicine. It will kill jobs. It'll be the largest tax increase. It is the essence is rationing, and it is the government takeover of our lives and the direction of our lives. We have one chance to get rid of it. One. That's 2012, because they put $105.464 billion in implementation money in the bill. It's currently metastasizing through every federal department. The federal government is trying to metastasize it through all 50 states and into the private insurance industry, which will eventually collapse, and we will only have the government running health care. This is a very bad system, and that's why we have to have, as our next president, a leader who is committed to the full-scale repeal, and it will require full pushback, and it will require leadership. So I am committed to that end, And we have to have someone who's completely committed to repealing Obamacare.
During the next hour, right now, Michele Bachmann is still in Iowa from the business forum that was held yesterday in Pella, Iowa. And a lot of good issues were discussed. I was going to give you my litmus test question.
Good. I can't wait.
I'm going to disguise it just to fool you here. But this was from this morning on Fox News. Haley Barbour, who's the governor of Mississippi, was talking about a piece of legislation that's being introduced down there. I think I'm not sure if it's a referendum or not. It would be to define personhood and put it into their constitution or put it into their laws that would, in essence, say life begins at conception. Here's how the conversation went. Listen to the legal theory that he pushes forward.
Well, a group has come together and they have an initiative under our initiative law that asks that we change the Constitution of Mississippi to say that life begins, and this is where I think we have some concerns, life begins at fertilization, cloning, or some other description. Now, I'm somebody that believes life begins at conception, and that's one of the reasons that I'm pro-life. But a lot of pro-life people have problems with this particular language. I think if this said life begins at conception, period, it would get an overwhelming majority. However, there's concern that this is ambiguous, and there is, even in an enormously pro-life state like mine, there's some concern about this. Frankly, I wish the proponents had just gone to the legislature and said, we'd like for you to change the law to say that life begins at conception. It would have sailed through our legislature about 100 to 10.
But Governor, let me ask you this, because I'm limited on time. Can a state even do this? There's a federal law on the books regarding abortion.
It does not overrule Roe versus Wade. We are subject to the preemption clause of the U.S. Constitution, the supremacy clause. That federal law is superior here. The proponents, I think, are hoping that this will be a bridge to a Supreme Court case. But frankly, some of the opponents are afraid of that because they think this is not going to be a winning case, that they can get a better case than this.
All right. There's so many things in that. We can't focus on every one of the assertion. I'm not going to get entangled by the fertilization versus conception thing. Theologians can debate about that, and I'm sure that's interesting. But what he said, well, the premise was that she served up, well, there's a federal law that is about abortion. And he said, well, we can't overturn Roe versus Wade. This doesn't overturn Roe versus Wade, and there's a supremacy clause in the Constitution about federal law. Both of them seem, well, I'm not going to, how you respond to what you heard? And what did you hear that you would consider suspect, if anything?
Well, the Supreme Court does not make law.
Exactly.
The Congress of the United States makes law. That's how our Constitution works. And so the Congress of the United States needs to assert itself and define the issue regarding life. Congress can do that, and the president could sign that into law. And as President of the United States, I would help to lead that effort to pass a federal law that would define human life, beginning when science also demonstrates when life begins, and that's at the very moment.
We were talking off the air a little bit about the pro-life movement over the years. Since '73, I have been dissatisfied with the political class and to some degree the pro-life movement, starting with the same premises that both of those people did. In order to get abortion, to get rid of it, we have to change everybody in the Supreme Court. You have to elect us, and then we can appoint new court members. And in order to change the law of the land, and they imply Roe versus Wade is the law of the land, you've got to just keep electing people on our team, and we'll eventually get this thing fixed. I think that's bull hockey.
Well, we want to win at every level. Certainly, I will only be appointing originalists, that is, people who believe in the original intent of the Constitution and who believe in fidelity of the Constitution. I will only appoint judges who believe along that line. But that's why it's important for Congress to grow some leadership. And within their leadership, recognize you are Congress. Yes. You don't have to have the Supreme Court tell you what to do. If you look at the founders, they would have laughed if they would have thought that the Supreme Court was going to be writing the laws of the land. You might as well dispense with the people's representatives. That's what a Congress is for.
But you had both of those people starting with that assumption
That's right.
that if the Supreme Court speaks, it's the law.
And the law of the land is what Congress writes and the president signs into law.
So you don't have to replace the Supreme Court to get rid of a defective decision.
I would want to do both. I would also be looking at only appointing originalists to the Supreme Court, but I believe that the Congress needs to come up with this law, and I would advocate that.
Michele Bachmann is here. You can be as well. This is Carl. You want to talk about a different form of law, and welcome aboard, sir.
You bet. Good morning, Congressman Bachmann.
Hey, Carl. I'm glad you're on the.
Iowa.
I'm glad you're on the line. It's good to be back home. This is where I was born and raised.
Yeah. Say there has been several states around the country that judges have been sneaking or implementing Sharia law into their courts. I consider that absolutely treasonous to do something like that, and I would like to hear your opinion because I haven't heard anybody make any statements about this at all.
Sharia law is the theological law, the religious law that is followed by Muslims. Certainly, that does not have a place in the United States courtroom, nor should it be followed by United States judges. The only thing that United States judges should be bound by is the United States Constitution or state constitutions and the state and national laws of the land. Sharia law cannot be considered. It's been very troubling to see some United States justices bring in Sharia law. Sharia law has caused has had untold consequences in other nations that have adopted it. We surely must realize that this would be against our Constitution because that would usurp or put Sharia law over the Constitution. That would be wrong.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate your call, Carl. And this is Howard. Good morning, Howard.
Good morning. Good morning, Michele Bachmann.
Hey, Howard.
I've been a supporter of you in the past, and I'll vote for any Republican that gets the nomination. But I wanted to bring up this issue that Obama wants to raise that tax on the wealthy from 35 to 39.5, where it was before Bush cut it.
Yep.
And I think you ought to do that. I mean, what do we care about these people? Like I read in the Wall Street Journal today about these guys getting these big bonuses, leaving the company, and like these ball players are making $25 million a year. They don't create jobs, and I think it's going to come back to bite us if we don't go ahead and give him. That's not going to balance the budget anyway.
All right. What about the Bush tax cut?
Well, I think that let's look at a couple of facts first. When you look at who pays federal taxes, 51% of the American people no longer pay any federal income taxes. Let me just repeat that. 51% of the American people pay no federal income taxes. That means it's 49% of the American people that are bearing the cost of federal income taxes. The top 1% of income earners are paying 40% of all the taxes. I want to repeat that. The top 1% are paying 40% of all federal income taxes. So what the point then would be that those people aren't paying enough. They should be paying more. We have to recognize that people who are making $200,000 a year are the ones who 70% of those people are running their businesses through their personal income tax return, which means if we increase that rate from 36% to almost 40%, you will be having that additional tax hike on businesses primarily. And that means that there'll be fewer jobs that are created. So the final result of that idea would be that we will have fewer jobs, we'll have more job losses and more unemployment, and that won't help anyone. What we need right now is jobs. We have a jobs crisis in this country, and it's because we have a poor environment for creating jobs. I know how to do that. I know how to turn the economy around and create jobs, and you don't do it by raising taxes on businesses.
Hey, thank you for your call, sir. Because it's my job, I have to ask a political question.
Well, I'm ready. That's why I'm here.
All right. 2 words. Ed Rollins.
Yes. There are some things I will never understand, put it that way. But I'll tell you, I've been so extremely gratified and I'm highly motivated because my opinion is 2012 is it. I really do believe this is the last exit ramp for the United States. In this election, this can't be just another political election where we just put anyone in the White House, because a lot of times we'll elect a Republican and we're disappointed because they don't deliver. That's why our candidate has to have a proven record of a core conviction where they will stand up and build the fence. I will build the fence. I will get rid of taxpayer subsidized benefits for illegal aliens. We will have English as the official language of the American people. We'll see the tax cuts. We will see the regulatory decreases. But most importantly, I will not rest until we repeal Obamacare.
I think the two words I asked was Ed Rollins.
You did. There's nothing to talk about. I don't understand that, but I do understand why I'm running.
Okay.
And I'm running because I know that we can get our country back. But we can't get it back with the current business as usual. I'm not a politician. I'm a proven outsider who fights on the inside, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take that Iowa sense of fighting into Washington, D.C.
There's an interesting point you raised in that last segment when you talked about no benefits for illegals.
Yeah.
One of the things that's gotten Rick Perry into some binds, and you've challenged him in debates about tuition for the children of illegals. This goes back to your philosophy of the courts, because in 1973, in the Plyler case in Texas, the Supreme Court said, hey, you have to educate these kids. They have 14th Amendment rights. And that was a 5-4 vote in 1973. Apparently, Rick Perry doesn't even know the history of that, so he doesn't even understand his state was required to do this by that Supreme Court decision. We have that same provision here in Iowa that the Iowa Department of Education has on their own website. We have to, by the law of the land, it says right on their website, we have to educate the children of illegals. And you ask them what the law was, well, that's Supreme Court decision. We're right back to judicial supremacy again. Yeah. How do you deal with that?
Through the laws, through laws that Congress passes. That's part of our problem that we have in the United States, and you've just identified that we have been bound. Now, one of the other issues that we haven't brought up and talked about yet is the issue of anchor babies. That's women who come into the country illegally and have a baby. They cross the border.
There was something on MSNBC about Brian Williams talked about. They're coming from China to do this. They have junkets for that purpose.
They come in to have a baby here, and that baby becomes the anchor that creates a whole host of welfare benefits that attach to that baby, and we, the taxpayers, pay for them. Now, we are not required to pay for those taxpayer benefits because of the 14th Amendment. We can change the law legislatively so that we no longer have that obligation. Congress has failed to do its duty by passing laws to protect the American people. Again, part of our problem is that in 1965, Lyndon Baines Johnson put through one law after another that created the modern welfare state called the Great Society Program. It's been a multi-trillion-dollar experiment in failure, and that's part of what I want to repeal, is the failed trillions and trillions of dollars in the welfare state that aren't doing our country any good. Prior to the mid-'60s, when people would come into our country as immigrants, they didn't come in for the purpose of being on the welfare system. That's changed. Today, it's a welfare state, and we are redistributing wealth. We are today a bankrupt nation. I hate to deliver bad news, but we are a bankrupt nation, and we are borrowing over $100 billion a month. Now, consider the Iowa state budget is $6 billion. And as a nation, we're borrowing over $100 billion every month. This is serious money. We can never continue to afford to pay this back, so we have to stop. They made a pledge that they weren't going to give any bonuses to Fannie and Freddie executives. And, of course, they were the epicenter of the financial meltdown. This is government. This was a government-created financial meltdown that we're all still reeling from. And the FHA just announced that they approved $12.8 million in bonuses for these geniuses who were the engineers behind the financial meltdown.
Does Congress have any oversight over this? Can you guys say no?
Of course, Congress has oversight, and this is an absolute outrage. And so they need to do it. Well, they need to do a defunding. They need to do a defunding of the monies, the origin for Freddie and Fannie.
Can executive orders overturn a defunding resolution on the part of Congress?
The president has issued 5 executive orders in recent times, and so who knows what he's capable of doing. Nothing shocks me anymore. I just want to encourage your listeners, go to MichelleBachmann.com. We need your volunteer help, so please come to the MichelleBachmann.com, or you can call 515-650-3202, 515-650-3202. We're located behind the Panera in Urbandale.